Alright guys, welcome back for another video on HAIKYU Fly High, and today I'm gonna talk about the potential impact of Sakusa and Komori coming in early, because I feel like there's still some speculation that could be going on in terms of which way the game would take, which I feel like is very important, and that would also have an impact on whether or not you would want to summon for Sakusa and Komori, which I will also talk about at the end of the video, okay? But start off, I just want to give a bit of a background of this change and why it's such a big change, okay? So basically, we are going to get Sakusa and Komori coming up next, okay? Well, actually, theoretically, the only thing confirmed is Sakusa coming up next, but it's very likely Komori will be the one right now afterwards because they tend to release all of the schools together, okay? Now, on JP and Taiwan server, that wasn't the case. So basically, after the release of Hoshiyumian Hirogami, which is where we are right now on global, the next character that was due to release was actually Yu R Kageyama. This was their 1 year anniversary, I believe. And after Yu R Kageyama is out, then they started introducing SP characters. So basically, we have SP Hinata, then follow up with SP Kenma. Then afterwards, we have the school sim, the SP character. So basically, SP Sugawara, then SP Nishinoya. Then we have the beach sim, the summer sim ones as well. So SP Bokuto, SP Akashi, and also SP Aone. And only after all 8 of those characters have been released, that's where we then started seeing the latest UR character, which is Sakusa and Komori. So essentially on global, we have fast forwarded by 8 banners in order to get those 2 characters. Now, that is actually going to be very, very important for the speculation, which I'm going to talk about next. Which, like I said, it's a speculation, so I don't know which way the game will take, but I just want to point this out because it can actually go into 2 directions, which is what is actually going to be the stats Sakusa and Komori are going to have. Now, you guys may not know, but despite the fact Sakusa and Komori are of UR rarity, they actually have stats which are equivalent of SP characters, okay? It's not because their kits are good. Their raw stats are literally equivalent to SP characters, which is going to be higher than all of the other UR characters. And the reason for this was that because when SP characters first were introduced, their raw stats were so much higher than all of the other UR characters, people complained, okay? The whole community complained, and then afterwards the devs were trying to make it such like SP characters are not power creeping the UR character, but actually they are of the same level, and that's where they have then made the move of making Sakusa and Komori have stats which raw stats which are equivalent to SP character. Okay, so I'm not even talking about whether or not their kits are good. Their raw stats are already better than all of the other UR characters and make them SP tier. Now you won't be really able to see them from the character page because I can only show you the level 1 stats, which you can't really tell much difference. However, if I show you in the gallery for the memory, this is going to be a lot more obvious. Okay, so if I just show you the wind spark memory, for example. So first of all, let me just show you the gap between SSR and UR to show UR is better than SSR, okay? So for example, if I take any SSR wind spike memory, the first stats, which is quick spike and power spike, this is 663, okay? This is the case for all of them, okay? I can pick any SSR memory, and you can see they're all the same, regardless whether it's for defensive use or offensive use, always 663 in terms of the highest level. And then if I take a look at UR, you can see the highest are always going to be 729, okay? I can show you the both of the UR, always 729. And then if I show you the SP, they're all 838, okay? They're always going to be higher. So this already gives you a clear indication in terms of raw stats. It should have been SSR to UR to SP. And SP characters, they have a raw stats in terms of the memory, 838, whereas the UR ones only have 729. Now if we take a look at Sakusa, 838, okay? This is why this Sakusa and Komori, because they were introduced after all of the SP power creep, etc., the game tried to make it look like UR is equivalent to SP by just magically increasing their stats to the SP equivalent rate, okay? And that's kind of why they are going to be a lot stronger than any of the UR character, not just because of kit, but purely because they have higher raw stats, right? They're going to have like 10% higher raw stats straight up, okay? And that's kind of what makes Sakusa and Komori so good in terms of UR character. That is the case on JP, and that kind of makes sense on JP because the devs were trying to say UR are equivalent to SP. However, on global, is that still going to be the case? That is where it can get interesting because we don't have any SP characters yet. It's going to look very, very strange right now if they suddenly release UR character with stats which are going to be equivalent to SP characters, okay? Because there will be, you guys will just be thinking like, what the heck is going on? Why do you have character of the same rarity but so much stronger, right? And not to mention, we still have one other UR character after Sakusa and Komori, which is going to be UR version Kageyama. UR version Kageyama is still UR stats, okay? If I show you the memory, 729, okay? That's equivalent to Asumu and also Okawa, okay? 729. That's the stats of UR Kageyama. This is a lot lower than the stats for SP setters, okay? So it's just going to look super strange if they're going to release Sakusa and Komori with SP equivalent stat, and then only to afterwards downgrade the next UR character, Kageyama, back to the UR equivalent stats, okay? So that's kind of why I am still suspicious in terms of which way the game will actually do now that they have actually brought forward Sakusa and Komori up so much earlier. Because the game can actually literally just be very transparent with us saying SP character are going to be stronger than UR character, and therefore I'll just going to make Sakusa and Komori, I'm just going to nerf their raw stats for them to be equivalent on the global version, right? We have already seen multiple examples where global doesn't have to follow JP, and that could once again happen here. Or equivalently, they could actually make them equivalent to JP and then just borrow everything over without making any changes, right? That is the two directions the game can take. I don't think anyone have any concrete evidence of which way that is going to take. So that's kind of why I am going to warn you guys and also caution this out up front before you make the decision on whether or not to summon for Sakusa and Komori. The number one thing you want to do on Wednesday when you log on to the game, I will do this myself as well, but I just may not be able to post a video, at the first point. But basically, the number one thing you guys want to do, log into the game, go to your memories for Windspiker, take a look at the maximum stats for Sakusa's memory, take a look at the maximum stats for your Hoshiyumi or Bokuto memory, take a look and see whether there's any difference. If they are the same, that basically means Sakusa and Komori are going to be nerfed, and then you are actually going to pay a lot more attention in terms of the actual kit before deciding whether or not Sakusa is a must summon. However, if Sakusa and Komori are actually going to have SP equivalent stats, which basically makes them like at least 10% stronger than of the UR character, then in those cases, I would say Sakusa is almost like a must pull if you have the resources, okay? So that is going to be the number one thing you want to do on Wednesday before deciding to summon, okay? Please do check that first. Now, what if global server actually does it the other way around and actually nerf the raw stats for Sakusa and Komori for them to be only at UR level rather than SP equivalent stats? In those kind of cases, I think the value of Sakusa is going to drop massively. For Komori, not so much, which I'll talk about in a bit. But the reason for this is going to be quite simple. First of all, because they're UR character, that basically means, they have UR level stats. That basically already means they are going to be equivalent in terms of other UR characters of the same position, and also in terms of an SSR character, but if you have the max dupe, okay? So for example, a max dupe SSR character is more or less similar level to a zero dupe UR character. That's something you have to bear in mind. And also, if those two characters only have UR equivalent stats, that also means in the future, when we do get SP characters of the same position, they will be power creeping them as well, okay? So those are all the factors you have to bear in mind. And especially because right now we are getting closer and closer to when SP characters are going to be introduced, and unless Global decide to nerf the stats of all of the SP character, otherwise Sakusa and Komori will be power crap if they only have the UR equivalent stats, okay? So those are two things you have to bear in mind. Now let me go a bit more practically and just talk about, if you don't have limited resources, who should you actually summon for, if any. So first of all, I already talked about whether or not you should, I already talked about done a review of all of the kit for Sakusa in yesterday's video, which I'll link in the comment section, so you guys can check that out. But basically in that video, I did say in terms of skill resonance, it's going to be ideal for Sakusa to be at least at 2 dupe to unlock that AoE buff for reflex stat. Now, whilst that's good, however, if you have to make a choice between going 2 dupes on one of those characters versus getting one base copy of each character, I would strongly recommend just getting one base copy of each character, okay? And that's because their deployment bond is very universal, and that makes them a plug and play regardless of the rest of your team, okay? So if you have to make a choice between going dupes on one of those characters versus just getting one copy each, it should definitely be going one copy each for both Sakusa and also Komori, okay? The second thing is that, let's say if you have limited resources and you can only guarantee one of the two characters, which one should you go for, or should you go for any of them at all? And my recommendation here is that yes, you should still go for one character, and that character is going to be Komori. Now, the reason for this is going to be quite simple. First of all, in terms of incremental value, if we think about Sakusa, Sakusa is a wind spiker. Right now in the game, we already have two other UR wind spiker, Bokuto Hoshimi. I don't know how many of you guys have that, but even if we don't talk about the UR character, if we talk about the SSR character, Tanaka and Iwatsumi are two of the best SSR wind spiker, especially when you have them at max dupes. They are going to hit very, very hard and also give supporting ability. And then outside of those two, who everyone should already have a high level because they were available from day one and on basically all of the banners since then. But eventually, once we have the free selection in terms of SSR, there's also going to be Kita and also Aran. Both of them are going to be equivalent, almost equivalent to a UR character when they're max dupe as well, okay? So if we actually talk about Wind Sparker in the SSR tier, there are already 4 characters which are very, very strong when you actually dupe them out. So that basically means the incremental value of Sakusa over one of those, and also not to mention the other 2 UR wind spiker you could have obtained, it's not going to be that high, okay? So the incremental value of Sakusa is not going to be that high. Whereas for the liberal position, what Komori is able to bring, that is actually going to be completely different. Because first of all, there are no other UR liberals in the game, so therefore Komori is already going to do a lot better than everyone else. Second thing, even if we talk about an SSR liberal, the reality is vast majority of people's universal milk dupe should really be going to Kita and also Aaron Ojiro, because those two are pretty much the only long-term SSR character that you still be using in club contests and also in some other game modes, etc. So vast majority of the time, your milk dupes should be going to the wind spiker position. They wouldn't be going on to your liberal. So once again, no SSR character, for vast majority of players, all of your SSR liberals wouldn't be at very high dupes, and therefore Komori is going to be a solid improvement over them as well, okay? And we are just talking about the short-term value here. In terms of the long-term value, eventually the game is going to introduce cases where you have to fill in 3 different teams. And right now, there are only 2 liberal which are higher than SSR rarity, which is Komori and also SP Nishinoya. So even if Komori is going to come at the stats equivalent to UR rather than SP, he's still going to be in the top 2 liberal. And that basically means he is going to be guaranteed a spot once we move into those game modes where it's requiring you to play 3 different teams, okay? So the value of Komori is long lasting, where Sakusa, the incremental value is not going to be as high, and also eventually once the position limit update is here, you may not even end up playing any wind spiker. For example, if you go for a quick team or a block speciality team, it's very likely you won't even be playing any wind spiker at all. So the versatility of Sakusa is going to be a lot less in comparison to Komori, and that's kind of why out of the 2, I strongly recommend you picking Komori over Sakusa. And like I said, even if in the future there will be SP character, I still highly recommend you guys to actually pick up 1 copy of Komori, for the simple reason is that Komori will always be there in your 3 teams, right? He's just a top 2 liberal, so he will always have a spot there. And before SP Nishinoya out, which will be, I'll estimate to be another 2 months after Komori, you can enjoy the benefit of the strongest liberal for at least those 2 months in short term as well, and still have that value long term wise in those 3 versus 3 team battles. So that's kind of why in all of those cases, I would strongly recommend definitely picking Komori up. And if you can only pick one of the characters, it has to be Komori 100% of the time, okay? So those are going to be my recommendation for whether or not you want to summon for those 2 characters. In terms of the memory, it's going to be somewhat similar as well. I already done a review of the memory for Sakusa, where I basically said this still looks good on paper, but in practice, it's actually going, you essentially need to jump through 3 different hoops to actually trigger it. If you want the full explanation, check out my video in the comment section. So that's basically the same for Sakusa. And vast majority of the time, I wouldn't actually recommend picking this up if you don't have enough resources to guarantee both of your characters and also, for example, prioritize Komori's memory. Because Komori's memory is actually really, really good. Once again, we don't know whether or not the stats is going to be SP equivalent or UR equivalent. However, what I can tell you is that the best liberal memory right now is always going to be this UR and SP1, even if Komori's one is going to be nerfed. However, SP Nishinoya's memory is very specific to characters who can actually spam ultimate attack, which vast majority of the time it's either going to be Yamagata or SP Nishinoya. And that basically means SP Nishinoya's liberal memory is not very universal, whereas Komori's memory is actually very universal, okay? So basically from your both character comparison, you should be picking Komori over Sakusa if you can only get one of them. And from memory perspective, you should be picking Komori over Sakusa as well, okay? If you can only get one of them. So those are going to be my recommendation in terms of which one you want to summon for, both in terms of character and also memory. Let me know what you guys plan to do and also your thoughts on this change in banner order.